Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world and Australians. Listen up, listen up. Just yesterday, in fact I think it was this morning South African time, I put up a video which reflected two different contradictory views on AstraZeneca, where you had the Australian Channel 9 reporters saying, get your jab, get your AstraZeneca jab. Now, tonight, just a few minutes ago, on the same channel, Channel 9 News, you'll see what was published or what was presented to the whole of Australia by Channel 9 regarding AstraZeneca. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because all four of the main vaccines that they are jabbing people with are experimental. They haven't gone through the normal testing regime of a vaccine. And YouTube, that is not medical misinformation. That is fact. And what's happening right now with AstraZeneca is that they're finding that there are adverse reactions to this vaccine, which result in a thing called deaths. Now, in Australia, we have not had one death from COVID-19 in 2021, but we have had several deaths, many deaths from the vaccine put into people to try and stop them not getting COVID-19, because the vaccine doesn't stop you get COVID-19, but apparently it stops you becoming a severe situation where you might go into hospital and, even more unlikely but possible, you might die as a result of having COVID-19. Now, think about this fact. Many people in Australia this year have died as a result of having the vaccine, and not one Australian has died from the virus itself. And yes, I know there could be an outbreak of the virus in Australia. I get that. But the point is, why rush a vaccine when you've got people in a situation where they're like in a cocoon? Because, as I said, and as you'll see in the video that follows, they're saying that Australia is basically like a little island. It's cut off from the rest of the world, all the shit that's going on with the coronavirus. And yes, there have been 2 million deaths in the last year from coronavirus. But in Australia, there hasn't been one death, not one. There are about 50 cases of coronavirus in the entire country at the moment, and they're all under quarantine. They all know where the origins are from. The wider population are starting to go back to a normal life. And yet here you've got the mainstream media trying to push down the throats of every Australian who hasn't had it yet, the vaccine. The untested experimental vaccine. And now there's pushback because AstraZeneca has issues. And you've seen what they've done in Europe. They're starting to restrict the use of AstraZeneca, and that's now starting to happen here in Australia. I've been saying this all along. I've been saying that, look, you know, if you're going to mandate vaccines, which a lot of countries are now doing through very nefarious ways, you first make sure the vaccine is safe. And they cannot guarantee that. That's my point. My point is that they are trying to force their citizens, using the mainstream media, to feel comfortable with taking an experimental vaccine that could, in the future, be very damaging to them and their family. I'm going to leave it at that, but I think if you join the dots, you know what I'm talking about. Here comes the video, which, as I said just minutes ago, went live on Channel 9, which is the major Australian television channel in Australia. You'll see how the sands are shifting. We've been warning about this from the very start. The mainstream media, they've been saying, don't worry, just get the jab, you'll be right. Now they're starting to change their tune. After 25% of Australians have already had the jab. Well, guess what? I am not having the jab. Please remember to subscribe to Loving Life on YouTube. Please remember to register on lovinglifetv.com, the platform we are moving to. Please remember to like this video. Please remember to share this video. And above all, please stay safe. And don't forget, tonight at 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, we're going to be talking about Super Brew, which is this huge rugby competition, and especially for the Loving Life family. People who participate in Super Brew, there's a huge food hamper as the prize for this competition, which involves the Irish and the Springboks in the upcoming rugby series. And you'll have to listen to tonight on lovinglifetv.com what Super Brew is all about, how to participate, and have some fun. And remember, it's all free. It doesn't cost a cent. Take care. Bye for now.
1 billion people vaccinated with AstraZeneca globally, and we've had 4 million AstraZeneca vaccines here. But critically, it is cautious, it is careful advice. We've accepted it immediately. We've immediately opened up Pfizer for 50 to 59s. And the advice also, which I think it is important to make, from Brendan Murphy, from Paul Kelly, from the Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation is, if you've had a first dose with AstraZeneca, please complete the second dose. It's what I've done, and I'm in that 50 to 59 age group, and it's considered to be safe and effective if you're having that second dose.
But people who've just had the jab in their 50s are now being told that they're running a high risk, a much higher risk than they thought they were running. They'd be feeling nervous tonight, and they'd be wondering why you've taken so long to make this decision.
Well, in fact, we received the advice at 12:50 today and stood up at 1:10 to share that advice with the nation. So
Sure.
What we have is continuous review by arguably the best medical expert panel in the world. And the interesting thing is Professor Hugh Tran at Alfred Hospital in Melbourne, one of the world's leading thrombosis experts, thinks that we're, because of our system, detecting more cases than almost any other country and being better able to treat than almost any other country. But nevertheless, we are being cautious, and because of the fact that we're in a low COVID environment, there have been 0 people that have died from COVID caught in Australia this year, but there are 2 million worldwide that have lost their lives. And so because of that, we are in the position to be cautious and then to move those in that age group from AstraZeneca to Pfizer.
You make the point that no Australians have died of COVID in this country this year. 2 Australians have died of complications from the AstraZeneca vaccine. And given that the risk of COVID in Australia is so minimal, it's quite a hard call to expect people to roll the dice on this very unpredictable, it's impossible to know what your risk is, isn't it, of blood clots?
Well, the risk has been set out in the advice from the Technical Advisory Group on immunisation, and their advice is, of course, if you are over 60, you have far greater risks from COVID, and as Brendan Murphy said today, if you're over 70 and you catch COVID, you can have up to a 1 in 10 chance of losing your life. And so to be vaccinated is an immensely important individual protection, but it's also an immensely important national protection. We now have over 25% of the eligible Australians for vaccination who have been vaccinated, over 64% of the 70 and above. And so we're seeing very high levels of vaccination, and that's been growing. But yes, right throughout the pandemic, whether it's closing the border with China, whether it's been closing all the international borders, by following that medical advice early, that's what's kept us in a situation of 0 lives lost this year, as opposed to 2 million worldwide. And that's what we've done again today. And it is a challenge. It's a challenge worldwide. Every day there are challenges. It's just that our challenges are mercifully far less than so much of the world faces.
Aren't we getting to a point where we have 40 million Pfizer vaccines arriving in Australia by the end of the year, another 10 million Moderna vaccines arriving in Australia by the end of the year? Can't we give Australians a choice of what vaccine they take?
Well, what we are doing is making sure that the available vaccines are distributed in order to maximise the number of older Australians who are most at risk from COVID having access to vaccine. The medical advice has been very clear.
Sure.
That AstraZeneca is available.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, we've got limited time. That's 25 million mRNA vaccines that are arriving in Australia by the end of the year. Surely we can give Australians a choice of what vaccine they have. If they have a problem with AstraZeneca, we can say to them, have this one.
Well, throughout the course of the acquisitions, we've said that there is whole of population access, but right now, nobody should be waiting. That's the very clear advice that Brendan Murphy and Paul Kelly, two of the world's leading experts that have kept Australia safe, reaffirmed today. Please do not wait, because if you do catch COVID, you could die. By having people vaccinated, we know that COVID is out there. We know that it's a risk to every country.
Okay.
We are in the fortunate position in Australia where it's at the most minimal of levels. Most days this year have been 0 days, but any day, anybody could be at risk, and that's why vaccination is so important.
It is important. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Tracy.
Professor Robert Boy is a vaccine and infectious diseases expert. I spoke with him a short time ago. Professor Boy, thank you very much for your time. What do you think will be the impact of today's announcement on the vaccine rollout and on hesitancy?
I think there will be some more hesitancy again, because people are saying, well, why didn't they do this before? Importantly, though, people should be reassured, because the balance of risk and benefit is even greater for individual people. If we change to 60 as a cut-off, we have much less risk of people getting clots, and the clots that they get are probably going to be less severe. Also, the risk from COVID and catching it, once you're in your 60s and 70s, becomes much, much higher of death or hospitalisation. So by focusing on protecting people over 60 with a vaccine that won't give them, or has a very rare risk of giving them a side effect, we've got an improvement in the system.
But we have hardly any risk of catching COVID in Australia because our international borders are closed. So it's quite a hard sell to say to people, hey, roll the dice on this random, unpredictable blood clotting syndrome, when effectively your chances of getting COVID in Australia right now are very slim.
The risk right now for someone in Australia like you or me is tiny. So if you compare that risk with the risk of vaccine, you get a bit more worried about the vaccine. The risk of dying from the vaccine currently is about 1 in a million or less. With the changes being made, it'll become more like 1 in 3 million.
Okay, can you explain something to me? Because I struggle with this hard line at, say, I struggled with it at 50, I'm struggling with understanding it at 60. Can you explain to me why a 59-year-old is at a greater risk of developing blood clots than a 60-year-old? Because now the 60-year-old has to roll the dice on possibly blood clots, the 59-year-old gets Pfizer.
The truth of the statistics is that a 59-year-old is at very similar risk to a 60-year-old. But you have to draw a line, and you have to have a means by which you can regulate and deliver vaccination that people can understand. It's not, entirely logical, but you have to draw a line.
Do you have to draw a line when we have 2 vaccines available in Australia? Can't we say to people, have the vaccine you want?
The key point all along is what we had available. We had only 2 vaccines. We had a tiny supply of Astra from overseas, and we had a tiny supply of Pfizer. So we had to balance the 2 across the different risk groups. It hasn't been easy. It would be great for people to have a choice. And it's becoming more and more so now that it's up to 60. You could choose below 60 to have Astra or to have Pfizer. Pfizer has rare side effects too.
Is it time for the Australian government to start thinking about giving Australians the choice of what vaccine they want? We've got 40 million Pfizers arriving in Australia by the end of the year. That's enough to vaccinate 20 million Australians. We've got 20 million doses of Moderna. That's enough to vaccinate another 5 million Australians. We've virtually got the whole country that could possibly be vaccinated with an mRNA vaccine. we can be confident now, surely, in giving Australians the choice rather than funneling them into one or the other.
That'd be great in about 3 or 4 months' time. We just don't have the supply right now to have the luxury of giving that choice. We just cannot do it at this moment. If the Indian variant, otherwise known as Delta, comes to Australia, within a month, without mitigation, without all the things that we do, you can have 1,000 cases from just one within a month. That's how quickly it spreads.
And is AstraZeneca effective against Delta?
Yes, it is.
Professor, do we know exactly why younger people supposedly are more at risk of blood clots than older people?
We know this is an immune-related problem and that the body produces antibodies against the little sticky things in our blood called platelets. That is more likely to occur in a younger person with a more robust immune system. But for adults given vaccine, they can, 1 in 100,000, 1 in 50,000, maybe even 1 in 25,000, they can respond aberrantly by making antibodies against themselves, against the platelets, and it's more severe with a more robust immune system in a young adult.
Okay, thank you for your time. Professor Robert Boy. Now the woman who turned super sleuth after her identity was stolen. Katie eventually tracked down the alleged fraud.